Good afternoon, everyone, and Happy New Year to you. My name is Greg Gilligan. I'm the Vice President of Operations for RVA757 Connects. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for the latest edition and the kickoff of 2024 for our RVA757 Connects Innovation Spotlight webinar series. We have a really fascinating program today about ivWatch and its game-changing technology that monitors and detects when an IV is leaking. We'll learn more about that a little bit later. But first, let me just go over some quick housekeeping matters. We have here's our agenda of what we're going to be talking about today. We'll give you a little bit of update on what's happening with RVA757 Connects, and then we'll go into the program. We'll leave time at the very end for some questions, and then I'll do some quick follow-up at the very end to let you know what's happening next. Also, just as a reminder, we are recording this webinar, and all of our webinars are available on our website after the program is over with. So if you have a chance, you want to go back and look at it again, you can do so. Also, if you have any questions, please send them to me via the chat function so that we can ask our speaker the questions. RVA757 Connects is a nonprofit organization, and as such, we rely on donations for our operations. And we have numerous corporate sponsors. Here are some of our corporate sponsors, and without them, we could not be operating. So we really thank all of our corporate sponsors for their support, both this past several years and going into 2024 as well. Let me tell you a little bit about what RVA757 Connects is. Our mantra is that we're an organization that's bringing the power of convening, connecting, and collaborating, and we do so as a nonprofit dedicated to improving the economic success and quality of life for everyone living in the Richmond region, which we call RVA, and the Hampton Roads region, which we call 757. We're a network of leaders representing business, community, and higher education. We're taking advancing the idea of the Richmond to Hampton Roads mega region as the I-64 innovation corridor. As you can see, we're pursuing several priorities. Here are some of them here. I just want to give you a quick update on a couple of our key initiatives this year. And all of these are on our website, our RVA757connects.com. The first is the I-64 Gap project. Now, the big news happened 2 months ago in the middle of November when groundbreaking took place on the widening project there for Interstate I-64. Several key dignitaries, including the Governor Youngkin and Transportation Secretary Shep Miller and VDOT Commissioner Stephen Bridge, all attended the groundbreaking ceremony. Construction started right after Thanksgiving. The first segment under construction is about 10 miles from Bottoms Bridge to the courthouse exit, which is exit number 214 in New Kent County. That first segment is expected to be completed by July 2027. Construction on the second 10-mile section will start in about 6 months or so, and construction on the third section will start about 6 months after that, according to VDOT. The entire 29-mile Gap project is expected to be finished by spring of 2028. Another one of our priorities is, let's see, there we go. Another one of our priorities is the efforts to get the Hampton Roads and Richmond mega region designated as a global internet hub. What we found is that the world's next global internet hub isn't a city, but rather a mega region that extends all the way from Richmond all the way to Hampton Roads. This 3-foot by 2-foot map explains visually how the I-64 Innovation Corridor becomes a global internet hub by combining the digital assets from both the Richmond region and the Hampton Roads region. There is an established list of core characteristics of what makes up a global internet hub. When you view the Richmond region and the Hampton Roads region together, we have these core components. We developed a strategic plan to make this happen. 10 strategies have been identified to make the I-64 Innovation Corridor one of the world's recognized global internet hubs. If you go to our website and click on the map, you can get a better idea of these digital assets. If you'd like to have a copy of this map, email me and we'll send you one. You can also read an article in Virginia Business Magazine about the Global Internet Hub strategic plan that was discussed during our annual Convergence event in September. You can read the full strategic plan and the executive summary on our two websites, both at RVA757connects.com and globalinternethub.org. We're also advocating for increased passenger rail service between and to and from the RVA region and the Hampton Roads regions. We are doing so by encouraging rail improvements in our mega region, working with the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority and the Department of Rail and Public Transportation. We have convened meetings with those agencies along with planning district commissions in both mega regions, both here and down at Hampton Roads. We partnered with the Virginians for High-Speed Rail along with the Southern Environmental Law Center, the Greater Washington Partnership, and the New River Valley Passenger Rail on a new report that just came out a couple of months ago. The Virginia Passenger Rail Keys to Further Success report is a comprehensive examination of current state of passenger rail in Virginia and a roadmap for its expansion and its enhancement. You can read the report on our website. We're also supporting the creation and extension of bike walk trails in the mega region. There's a mounting evidence that investment in bike walk trails infrastructure is delivering many community benefits. The first one, the Fall Line Trail, which goes from Ashland to Petersburg, back in October, there was groundbreaking on the first segment of it in Henrico County. Sometime this winter, groundbreaking will take place in Hanover County for its part of its segment. The phases consisting of up to 20 miles should be under construction in the next 12 months, and all of it should be completed by 2026. Richmond Sports Backers has been spearheading this efforts for many years, and we are supporting them in any way we can. Another focal point is the trail being planned that's the extension of the Virginia Capitol Trail beyond Jamestown. Two segments for this trail are from from Jamestown to Williamsburg to Fort Monroe on the peninsula, and then from Jamestown to Williamsburg across the Surrey Ferry to the Virginia Beach oceanfront. But to have this happen, $500 million is still needed for both segments. Local governments are very supportive of this project. Only small segments are moving forward, and I'll mention one of those in just a second. But the project needs more traction to really gain speed. Good news happened. Virginia Beach got last month when the U.S. Department of Transportation awarded $14.9 million for the Virginia Beach Trail. Money will be used to build a 3-mile segment from Newtown Road to Town Center in Virginia Beach. It's just a step closer to becoming a reality. The trail in its entirety will eventually run the length of the city, a total of 12 miles. You can get and read about and get updates on our initiatives on our website, RVA757 Connects, as you can see there. So now on to today's topic of discussion. And we're taking, innovation is taking place right in Newport News, Virginia. Having an accidental leak from an IV can cause serious harm to patients, and it can result in nerve damage, could result in scarring, permanent staining of the skin, and even death in some cases. But ivWatch has more than 70 patents addressing this problem. The company has developed sensor and patient monitors that identify when an intravenous line is leaking, and it alerts doctors and nurses that a problem is occurring, often before they can even spot it with their own eyes. This non-invasive technology continuously monitors a patient's IV status using advanced optics to notify in real time of any issues relating to tissues that indicate a potential IV leak. Serial entrepreneur Gary Warren has an eye for a good idea. The former NASA engineer learned of this game-changing technology that could monitor and detect IV infiltrations. The only problem at the time, the technology didn't work. After acquiring the company that owned the technology in 2010, Gary assembled a team of leading scientists, clinicians, hospitals, and investors to solve this problem. The team set up a command center in his basement, racking up hours and filling up chalkboards determining how to make it all work. After 5 years of steadfast trial and error, the team not only had a working prototype, but a vision for a family of smart sensors and patient monitors that would prove to transform patient care and safety, not just here in the United States, but around the globe. Gary has a 14-year career as a research scientist at NASA in aerospace and computational fluid dynamics. He left NASA to start a successful internet infrastructure company in the mid-1990s and served as CEO until it sailed to Symantec in 1999. After that, he served as CEO for a venture-backed mobile platform company as smartphones were just beginning to emerge on the market. After the sale of that company to Oracle, he worked for various venture capital companies doing financial analysis and due diligence, which brought him to work being done on IV infiltrations under the National Institutes of Health grants. Before I turn over the program to Gary, I just want to remind everyone that if you have questions, please leave some time at the very end for them, but also use the chat function to be able to ask questions. So now let me turn the program over to Gary so he can make his presentation. And all I will say, Gary, is that as I mentioned to you previously, the first time that I ever heard about this company, I thought it had something to do with a watch, like my iPhone watch. But anyway, Gary, thank you so much for participating today, and I'll turn it over to you now.
All right, great. Thanks for having me. Just some housekeeping here. I need to get my PowerPoint up without messing anything up. So I'm going to go to share, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to go new share. And then which one do I do? This one here? I'm not talking to myself. I have an IT guy sitting next to me. You're good. All right. Hopefully you can all see the twirling logo and not all my notes. So let me go ahead and get started. What I am going to talk about today, just for about a half an hour, is revolutionizing IV safety. And it's some big words, but what we do is we do patient monitoring for IV extravasation. And the number one reason everybody is scared to go to the doctor or the hospital is because of this thing, the needle. And it's amazing the things that people don't realize how much damage that an IV or a needle can do to a person. And we're going to talk about that a little today, and we're going to talk about how we have solved that problem. So we mentioned the chalkboards. When I first got involved with this company, we actually, in my basement, brought in there was an area, a room that we were going to, a spare room in the basement we were going to use for a home theater. We ended up carting in 4 cubicles and painted the walls with chalkboard paint, and really try to introduce the discipline that you follow in science and at NASA, is where you try to do analysis and simulation, and then you try to do testing on models, and then you go build the real airplane, right? And so that's kind of the process we followed. And these chalkboards actually today are still on the walls in my basement, and I'm actually afraid to erase them now. So I don't know how long they'll be there. So who are we? We're a 50-person company. We're located in Newport News. And our goal right now is really to solve the problem with IV therapy. My father actually passed away from a bloodstream infection from a central line that he had in the hospital. And then I took a bad fall when I started this company and had to have my forearm reconstructed. So I had about 8 surgeries, and I got to witness firsthand all of these problems. And the more that we undug into the problems of IV therapy, the more apparent somebody needed to come up with a solution. So now that we're in this business, we get quotes, we get emails sent to us, and I will share some of those with you today. But we get emails that come in through our website all the time. This came from an emergency room doctor in the Midwest, but he had a 21-year-old patient last week with severe diabetic ketoacidosis whose brain death might have been prevented by ivWatch. And if you think about it, an IV, when it goes into your arm or your hand, it has to be inside the vein. And if it's not only can it cause damage to the tissue, the skin and the muscle around that vein, but you're not getting the therapeutic effect of that medication. So think about a stroke victim that actually goes in with a stroke and they have to get blood clot busting medication, TPA, in them, and they miss the vein. They don't get the therapeutic effect. And that can happen up to 1 in 6 times. It's crazy. So our mission here at ivWatch is to make IV therapy safer, and we're going to talk about how we're doing that. Our company vision right now is globally, we're becoming known as the IV safety company. We have over 30 bodies of clinical evidence right now, very clear demonstration of return on investment for customers using our products. And some exciting work that we're doing now is we're starting to develop a family of sensors spanning the drug library and can also integrate into other people's patient monitors and infusion pumps. And we'll touch on that briefly as well. As was mentioned, when I started this company, I hate saying the word I because this is, it takes a village, and there's been a lot of people that have given a lot to ivWatch. We have a great group of investors out there. And one of the things that was very clear is our investors wanted to make sure that we were doing our manufacturing and operations and R&D here in the region. A lot of times these small companies will start and it's like, oh, why don't you outsource all your manufacturing to China? Or why don't you outsource your R&D to a contract R&D lab? And why don't you outsource your sales to distribution? And then you just have a few people here. And we didn't do that. We follow all 3 of these things. We're in Tech Center in Newport News. We have a wonderful building. Our first floor is our manufacturing building. And we've developed processes now to manufacture biosensors that are world renowned now. Sales and clinical marketing, we do that all in-house, and I have a wonderful group of R&D engineers on staff. The reason we do that, one of the things that, if you all remember the SR-71 spy plane when it came out, the idea at Skunk Works at Lockheed was we're going to put the engineers and the tool builders and the people assembling the plane all in the same hangar. And they took that plane from an idea on a piece of paper to going very fast, very quickly. And all of these people work together. So let's talk briefly about the why. Everybody in every company has to have a why you're doing it. I mean, people love to work for companies that are righting a wrong. People love to work for companies that are advancing some, leading edge technology. And there's a huge why opportunity here that I will discuss. So here are some statistics. 90% of people that go into the hospital get an IV, and about 50% of peripheral IVs fail eventually. And 23% of those failures are due to infiltration. So if you've already tuned me out, you can get on Google and you can type in the words accepted but unacceptable. And you would think that would be about world hunger or wars going on. But if you type into Google accepted but unacceptable, you get stories about peripheral IV catheter failures in hospitals. This picture you see on the screen was not staged. A few months ago, I was on Reddit, and this is what an anesthesiologist actually did to a woman's arms during surgery while she was under. And these are the things that we need to try to prevent. There we go. And hopefully everybody's had lunch. NICU, these pictures are not being shown just to gross people out, but it's just to show the effect that some of these drugs have on some of our patient population. NICU stands for neonatal intensive care unit. So these are, babies that are, newborns, and sometimes they weigh as little as 500 grams. The prevalence of IVs going bad in these young children is 67 to 78%. We've seen as high as 80%. And in the NICUs we've worked with, we've driven that down to below 10%. So this stuff leaves permanent scarring on these young children. And I'm going to show you a little bit more on that in a second. These darkened pictures in the background, these are the dangers, though, that when an IV starts to leak outside the vein, if you get on Google and you type in IV infiltration, the dangers of infiltration are skin necrosis, scarring, amputation, nerve damage. And then the other side of that coin is medication dosing errors. Every time an IV leaks, you are not getting the drug. And so it's a double hit. You can get a bad injury, and if you're supposed to be getting an antibiotic, the reality is we don't know how much of that antibiotic you really got. It might have gone into the subcutaneous tissue. And that's a real problem. Things like radiopharmaceuticals, if you've ever had anybody going for a nuclear stress test or a bone scan, if the radiopharmaceuticals, these things have radiation in them, radioactive isotopes. If they don't go into the vein, they go into the local area, and there are cases where people end up with bone cancer a few years later. So I'm not going to go over every one of these things. This is what's starting to happen in the industry, though, now is juries are starting to award these huge settlements. And the one that happened just this last summer was a jury award in Indiana where a father of four, basically went in for a procedure on his foot, or I don't know where the procedure was. I take that back. But they put the IV in his foot, and what happened is they ended up having to amputate his leg below the knee, and the jury awarded $11 million. So these settlements are going up. And when I got involved in this company, actually, one of the things that intrigued me was Cincinnati Children's Hospital is a very good partner of ours, and they allowed us to come in and take data and actually see the problem firsthand and opened up about it. And so it allowed us to develop the solution that we have today. This next slide, ivWatch monitoring and early detection is critical. You can't stop a lot of these infiltrations from happening, but what you can do is you can alert when they start to happen. So these pictures here, this is an interesting story. These pictures here were actually published in several newspapers over in the Netherlands, and they were put on TV, and it was a photographer, he's a very well-known sports photographer, that was injured as a NICU baby, and he was allowed to come into UMC Utrecht in Utrecht and spend some time and take pictures of the damage that these IV catheters are causing to these young children. In the United States, you'd never see this published, but over there, they published it, and they actually raised over 200,000 euros, and over 3,000 people stood up and said, no more. We are not going to hurt our kids like this. And so this is our why. This is, again, why we like to come to work every day, because there's a paper that came out when they used ivWatch in this account, their injuries for that week went to 0. So you're going to hear me talk a little bit about infiltration versus extravasation. These are two big words. They're actually the same thing. It's when fluid leaks outside the vein because this catheter is going bad. And all it means is infiltration are non-vesicant drugs. So those are things that are non-irritants like saline solution. Extravasation is when the fluid is a vesicant. Things like chemotherapy drugs or things that have potassium in them, vancomycin, a lot of the antibiotics you get post-surgery. If those leak out, all of a sudden you end up with skin damage and tissue damage. I'm going to use them interchangeably because they're both very bad. I'm not going to go through each of these slides, but just real quickly, or each of these diagrams, most people think an infiltration is because when you get an IV, those of you who've been lucky enough to get an IV, sometimes they go all the way through the vein to the other side, and they think that is the definition of an IV that has infiltrated or extravasated. But that's not always the case. Sometimes, I heard this the other day, sometimes people train that they actually poke the catheter all the way through the vein until they see a blood return, and then the blood return stops. They back it out a little bit, and then they take the polyurethane part of the needle off and put it in your vein. But what they've done is in that lower right corner is they've left a leakage through the opposing vein wall. Other things that happen is you can bump it, you can pull it out a little bit. You get leakage through the insertion site. When you put a needle in a vein, you obviously have caused injury. And then sometimes the drugs themselves will cause the veins to break down. So if you know somebody that's had a vasopressor like dopamine or something, their blood pressure is dropping and they got to get drugs in them to constrict their veins. You can get a downstream occlusion, you can damage the vein wall, and it just starts to become porous. And so there's lots of different ways this can happen. And the way we developed our technology is we don't care how it happened. We're just looking for chemicals that are showing up outside the vein that aren't supposed to be there. The market for this, for the US market and sensor utilization, the market for this is huge. We look at the market, we break it down into 7 segments. 2 of them are in pediatrics, one's NICU, the other's pediatrics, and then we look at the adult market. And I'm going to show you some statistics on why we do it this way. But right now, this is kind of crazy. There are about 300 million IV catheters sold in the US every year. There's only about 300 million people in the US every year. And that holds true across the planet and in developed countries. If you go to Japan, it scales by population. So typically you sell about 1 catheter per person per year. There's about 150 insertions, so it takes them about 2 times to get it right of IVs inserted every year. And of those in the US, about 46 million of them are high risk. Those are where vesicant, irritant drugs, the patient population, you know, kids under the age of 12 or elderly, people in the ICU that can't communicate. And so this is a very large market for a product that can solve a serious problem. And this thing is, I think I'm locked in here again. There you go. This is interesting too. Medical devices, you know, when I got into medical, I thought, wow, look at these. Look at how quickly these medical device companies become valuable. But it's actually a long road on these things. Medical devices, a new technology on average takes 17 years to become standard of care. So it is a tough market to get into because the regulatory burden on this market is just extreme all over the world. We've had 15 audits here by the FDA and by TÜV. We've passed every one without any findings. But I'll give an example, pulse oximetry. You know those little things you put on the tip of your finger? And they tell you your pulse rate and your oxygen level. They became very popular during COVID. But in the old days, remember they would take 2 fingers and they would put on your wrist and measure your pulse. Nobody does that anymore because people want continuous monitoring. But that technology was introduced in 1995, and it really didn't become standard of care until the last 5 to 8 years. We are in year 13. So ivWatch right now, we are aggressively progressing towards become the standard of care. We are standard of care in several hospitals right now. In Cincinnati Children's Hospital, we're pretty much standard of care across many areas. Some operating rooms, standard of care. In the United Kingdom now, we are becoming standard of care in some infusion centers doing iron, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So here are some historical company milestones we've had. Right now, this company, the research actually started in about 2000. And I got involved with it in late 2010. And we advanced the algorithm side of it. Just because you have a sensor, a physical sensor that can detect something, there's very sophisticated mathematics that are behind the sensor and interpret the results. But we're a Virginia-based company. We are now in 3 of the top 10 children's hospitals in the US. We have about 50 employees. We are made in the USA. We have 71 patents globally right now. So our patent portfolio, we've spanned into the countries we're growing. We have no current competition technically, and our patent portfolio is really keeping people at bay. And it's not for a lack of trying, because a lot of the big companies are trying to emulate what we're doing. Our sensitivity, if our box goes off and says that this IV is infiltrated in 10 cc's or less, we are 99% sure that we've caught it. We are starting to expand now our work with, there's something coming out called the National Patient Safety Board, kind of being built on the model of the National Transportation Safety Board, where events like this will have to be reported to the government. So, like I said, we are the only FDA cleared and CE marked product on the market, and it's not 11. I think it's pretty sure it's 15 regulatory audits. So, where are we now? We are really primed for international growth. In fact, in quarter four, we finished a very strong quarter four. Half of our growth is coming from international markets because they have a different medicine. Basically, the way medicine is done, it's more of a socialized medicine platform. In the U.S., we go on the DRG rate. So I had actually a hospital executive tell me when the pandemic started that the business model of hospitals in the U.S. is to provide the least amount of health care for the most amount of money. Think about that. And it's not really the hospital's fault, but that's what the Affordable Care Act did, because what we do now is we will give you certain dollar amount under a DRG system where we say, hey, you need a new knee? I'll give you $40,000, do what you want. So then the hospital just tries to do it as cheap as they can. So some of the other, and then we have this insurance thing in the middle. Some of the platforms where we're having really strong success are in the national health system in the United Kingdom. They're actually the world's 5th largest employer. And so let me show you where we're going right now. We have 4 geographies that we're very focused on. In North America, population's about 379 million. The GCC region, which are the Gulf Coast states down in Kuwait, Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia. In fact, we had our first big install in Saudi Arabia this month. United Kingdom and Europe. Right now, we're having great success, especially in the NHS in Italy, the Netherlands, Belgium, and now we have a lot of great success going on in Australia and New Zealand and such. So we are actually putting together a small fundraise right now, and we're trying so we can capture these other markets. Our patent portfolio spans these markets as well. So where are we going today in the future? I want to talk a little bit about where we came from. This is a wall, actually, it's in our break room here. And again, we're going to stay very focused on IV safety in the company. We are going to continue to expand on our R&D efforts and follow that discipline that we have at NASA that I learned there. And yes, these are people at work here. I think I've probably had over 100 IVs stuck in my arm. And that's what makes this problem so hard. It's an invasive procedure, and you develop a product, and then you kind of look around the room going, okay, who's getting stuck with a needle today? But some of the neat pictures on here, that bottom middle is one of the first molds for the case that we had made, again, all made in America. And the top piece is some of the top pictures are some of the first sensors that we did. So we're really moving more towards spectroscopy. And you're all going, God, that's a big word. Well, let me tell you, everybody here knows what spectroscopy is because everybody here knows who Pink Floyd is. And this is from the Pink Floyd album. So when you look at white light, broad beam white light, you can actually put it through a prism and you actually get all the different colors. And that's the way our technology essentially works, is we inject light into the tissue and we look at all the different colors and how they get reflected back. And we can actually get signatures of chemicals. And that's what you see in the background on this slide, is we have a predictive algorithm. We're using near infrared light, we're using visible light, and basically we look for signatures of chemicals to show up that aren't supposed to be there. So in a nutshell, that's how we work. Again, our history goes all the way back to 2001. I will tell you, during the first few years from 2011 to 2014, I had to put my engineering hat back on, and we built a small supercomputer essentially in my living room. And I gotta love the nerds that do gaming all the time, because it's caused the computer industry to build these very powerful computer systems, and you can install Linux on them and you can submit jobs to them, and it's like working on a Cray again, and we were doing photonic simulations and optimizations with training data that we get. We stuck over 1,000 people with IVs. And so I could pretty much heat my house with this computer that we built. That was kind of the beginning. Then we bought a lot of other infrastructure items. Our first product that really came out to market was in 2017. Went into Cincinnati Children's Hospital, and then we had to figure out how to make the product cheaper and cheaper. And so this is our sensor today. It's really small, and it's this little bitty black thing on the front. It's a work of art. But basically what we do is we take very expensive spectral gear, try to figure out what the science is, and then build very inexpensive sensors that can emulate what that big spectrometer is doing on a general sense. So this year, as the pandemic has lifted, we're starting to get a lot of third-party validation, which is great. We had ECRI come out and validate our claims as well. So things are really starting to move forward fast. This is our product. We have a patient monitor, and on the right, we have a disposable sensor, and then we have a patient cable that you can use over and over again. So you get an IV, you basically get a sensor stuck on it, and it continuously monitors to make sure that IV is good. And we are approved for any body mass, skin tone, age group, and any peripheral IV site. And then here's a list of all the countries in. I think, what are we in now? 10, 9, 10? Yeah, so we're expanding rapidly. We actually, we're in mostly English-speaking countries right now, and we're working on expanding that even more. But again, only FDA cleared and CE marked product to detect IV extravasations. So let's talk about where we're going in the future. So right now we are hyper-focused on our international markets. We've shifted U.S. care focus to extravasation acknowledgement overseas. Basically, some of the countries overseas have recognized this problem and have things in place that they're trying to reduce it. We're targeting infusion centers. These are places where people go to get blood transfusions and drugs delivered on a weekly or monthly basis. Investing a lot in champions and reference sites. And it's about travel, travel, travel. So there's a group of us that travel the globe, and we're hiring people in various regions. As an example, I'm going to give you Andrew Barton. Andrew is the key opinion leader, and he is driving the extravasation reduction for the United Kingdom. And we basically put our product in his infusions, in one of their infusion centers. And he used to have 30 chairs. They had 2 to 3 extravasation injuries a week. They put our product in, and their injuries went to 0. So he went from a 2-week evaluation to a customer, and a very big advocate of our products. But the United Kingdom is very progressive. And in the background here, you can see they passed this resolution in the United Kingdom about reducing extravasation injuries. And they keep track of how much money this costs them. And, these are very good clinicians and very good doctors and very good hospitals. The U.S. doesn't have anything on top of them, but they have decided to recognize the problem. And here's the problem that affects a lot of adults. And iron IV extravasations are extravasations that never heal. Imagine that you have to go into the hospital and you have to get an iron infusion, IV iron, and this is what shows up. This scar will never go away. And those injuries we basically have gotten rid of in the national health system at Frimley Health right now. As I said before, 2 to 3 per week. And I think in 20 plus weeks now, we're at 0 extravasation injuries. So the product has performed extremely well. So it alarms about 5.6% of the time. And what they do is when it alarms, they just pull the needle and they start over again, and the injuries went to 0. Because of that, and there's the other side, a bag of IV iron is over $4,000. It's crazy how expensive some of these IV drugs are. And some of these immunoglobulin type drugs are over $10,000 a bag. So if you lose a bag due to an IV leakage, you can actually do a quick ROI. And basically for this one infusion center, they're losing $36,000. And instead, when they put ivWatch monitoring in, it costs them $5,200. So it's a 6x cost savings to use ivWatch. In the US, 9 million iron infusions a year are billed to Medicare. So that's people generally ages 65 and over. And so it's just a huge untapped market here to solve this problem so people aren't maimed by these injuries. So I'm just going to skip that. How? So our marketing campaign, we've really gone aggressive. And then these trade shows, I swear, I thought we were going to get kicked out of a trade show because they were assembling our booth. And all we were doing was taking pictures that other people have taken in other countries. We put up in our booth in the US and said, this is what we have to solve. And the people assembling this booth actually made us cover the pictures up because they were so disgusted by them. But they shouldn't be disgusted by them. These are things that are happening in our NICUs, and we have to solve them. So we have a campaign now called Pain Should Not Be Silenced, and it's actually received rave reviews. So if you get on our social media site, you can actually follow us and see some of the reviews we're getting for some of these incredible sales tools to create awareness that are out there. And the group, our marketing group now, is getting all these awards for things that are doing. Follow us on social media. We post quite heavily to see what we're doing for awareness. I think everybody should be aware of IV infiltration and extravasation because everybody here will know somebody that goes into the hospital or goes into the hospital themselves, and you need to be your own patient advocate. So as I mentioned, just kind of in summary, we do our own in-house manufacturing. This is a picture of our sensor assembly line, our own R&D expertise, allows us to build products quickly to address the market, and it's just the beginning. So we got a bright future, and we plan on putting Southeast Virginia on the map as we grow this company globally. So that's our goal, transform IV safety. And that small sensor is what we're doing it with. I'll leave you with this one quote, because sometimes people say, well, the injury heals, and so no harm, no foul. But one of the things in the Netherlands that they're worried about is you have people that are in pain, but they're not allowed to verbalize it, even young babies. And so they're not sufficiently developed. And you have to wonder what it does to the brain when somebody is trapped in pain and they're not allowed to verbalize it or solve it. And so that's why this problem is not just about the physical healing, it's about the mental healing that happens. So we're on a mission and we're here to solve it. And that's my presentation.
Gary, wow, fascinating. It's been great to understand. If you stop sharing your screen, I can, while you're doing that, I do have a question I've got some questions for you. We'll go to questions, in just a moment. But my big question for you, so let's say I have to go into the hospital and, what happens? I mean, can I request that they use this? Are they in hospitals in the Richmond area or in Hampton Roads region? I mean, how prevalent are these things?
They're not prevalent in Virginia, and you should ask for them. But yeah, they're not prevalent in Virginia right now. We're working on it. They're prevalent in North Carolina, prevalent out west, Midwest, down in the South. But yeah, we're in top three, three of the top 10 children's hospitals right now. But well, I will tell you, it's CHKD, I forget. CHKD does use them. So for children, CHKD is a prolific user of ivWatch on their kids.
Gotcha. Just a reminder to everyone, if you do have some questions, use the chat function so I can ask Gary some questions. But Gary, let me ask you, okay, so you talk about you talk a little bit about where you guys the company is heading, internationally, nationally. Are you raising money now? Are you going for another? I love of the Shark Tank, and you're beyond the Shark Tank, I'm sure. But are you raising more money? What's next for the company?
We are. We've hired an investment banker and going through a process so we can expand internationally. Expanding into those other three geos is very important to us. And we got to watch competition. We don't want competition showing up in a geo that will take share from us. Our technology is becoming more and more mature. We're able to get it out faster. And so we need to put the gas pedal down a little bit and raise money for this expansion we're doing.
So let me ask you, over the last 13 years, you've seen a lot of ups and downs and stuff. Was there any point where you just thought, "Oh my gosh, this is not going to take off, and what are we going to do?" Or vice versa? Did you think, "Gosh, this is really going to be"? Take us back to that point, I guess. Can you give us a sense of, you've been on a roller coaster ride. So what's it been like, to do this?
Yeah, well, I don't know how to put this. Every day is a roller coaster ride around here. But no, there are two defining moments in this company. When we first got the technology, we realized there was no understanding of the science behind it, and it really did not work. So we had to fix some basic, spectral stuff in the sensor design and all that. So we got that done. But we were doing all of our tests on bench testing. So we were using pig's feet. And so we were going to Farm Fresh and we were buying all of the pig's feet that they would have in the supermarket every morning. So the more pig's feet we bought, the more Farm Fresh was actually ordering pig's feet. And then they felt sorry for our CTO and they started giving him recipes on how to cook pig's feet. But here's the thing about having a
That's great.
model, and then we stopped buying pig's feet, and it wasn't good. But having a model on the bench, we got this product that worked beautifully. It just worked beautifully. And then so we got prototypes made and we put sensors on ourselves. And the problem was we move, right? So you'd raise your arm up, you'd raise your arm down, the thing would alarm all the time. And what happened is the amount of blood under the sensor changes as you raise your arm up and down. You swing your arm, you're actually pulling a couple G's in it. And so I thought we were done. I really thought we were done. I'm like, clinically, this product won't work. But we had one of our top engineers that had some experience in pulse oximetry, and basically figured out that we had to measure the amount of blood under the sensor and subtract that out of the signal that we were doing. And once we did that, they hooked a sensor up to me, gave me an IV, we went down to Best Buy and bought a Wii, and I'm an old guy, so I don't know how to use a Wii. So I'm running back and forth, right? And swinging my arm and the thing, just a nice flat signal. And then afterwards, they told me, you could have just sat on the couch and just did this. You didn't need to be running around. But that was probably the defining moment, and that's one of the core patents that we have is how to mitigate false alarms in a product, because that's a big issue in hospitals. You can't have a product that alarms all the time.
Right. Those are great stories. I wonder what is Farm Fresh doing now? They're not ordering as much pig's feet, maybe? I don't.
Well, actually, we're back buying pig's feet again, aren't we?
Okay.
so I think they're on to us now.
Gotcha. We have a question from someone who says, "Is this a disposable item? If there is such a success with it, I'm having a hard time understanding why it's not in every ICU in the country." And this person says, "I'm a provider, and I think I get called at least once or twice a night to evaluate infiltrate."
Yeah, call me. I don't, we go into that. So we are having a lot of luck in adult ICUs, because even they use a different type of line. And a lot of times in ICUs, they have a PIC, which is more, it's a central line. The problem with those, you get infection, but there's always a peripheral simple IV going. And you're right. The patients can't communicate, they're highly sedated. And it's nuts that any vesicant drug, any caustic drug going through a peripheral line should have an ivWatch sensor on it. You can work in our marketing department. That's our message.
We have a question from Sean Reddy.
Oh, and it is a disposable product. It's a disposable.
It is, okay.
It's the format. It's kind of like a pulse oximeter. It's got here. I can give you my 5-second demo. So you peel the bottom off. If you have an IV in your hand, this thing goes on, and then this release liner comes off. and we use the skin as a strain relief. And so you can move it around and you can put it on top of the IV dressing. But that little blue thing is just sitting next to the IV site, continuously monitoring it for the IV to go bad. It's that simple.
How much does something like this cost?
Sensors typically right now they're on all the major GPO contracts, and they're typically, depending on volume, anywhere from $28 to $39. But when you're talking about a $10,000 bag of drugs going bad, that's like nothing.
Right. So we have a question from Sean Reddy. He says, and he admits that you may have already answered this question when you talked about false alarms, but he wants to know, is effectiveness of sensor influence with mobilization of a patient? For instance, ambulating with a PT or working with an OT.
No. So the tissue blood volume correction, you cannot solve this problem and make it a clinically viable product because patients are ambulatory. They have to be able to move around without it alarming. And we have done a marvelous job of solving that problem. I mean, it's not like the pulse oximeter world. I mean, when I've been in the hospital, I say this is my nurse call button when I have a pulse ox on my finger because it just alarms, alarms, alarms. We don't have that problem.
So, Gary, let me ask you, a large part of your presentation related around chalkboards. You even said that the original one you still have in your basement, you don't want to get rid of it and stuff. Tell me, how did this concept, how did it all get started, and why have you carried that tradition through your various ventures? What can people learn from this?
Well, I don't know. I love chalkboards. So my first job, I worked at NASA 14 years, and I had a wonderful mentor. He was the chief science officer. And you remember the old days, we had slate chalkboards, a nice shiny slate, and they had the big chalk that you could write on them with. And every time you walk into that guy's office, here I am, I'm like 19 years old, and this guy would whip a piece of chalk at you, and he would say, "Tell me the definition of a derivative." Or I want you to write out, the Reynolds average Navier-Stokes equation. So you're afraid to go in this guy's office all the time because you're getting a piece of chalk thrown at you. But my whole engineering career revolved around standing around chalkboards. That was the water cooler. And so when I got married and had kids, actually the front of my refrigerator, I had a custom panel made, and it's a chalkboard. And then I put a slate chalkboard in the mudroom. And everywhere where I've been, I use chalkboards because they just feel good. I hate whiteboards. I hate them. Chalk is coming back, man. It is like the vinyl of music. It is going to come back along with overhead projectors. Mark my words.
That's good. Let me ask you another question. We have a question from Al Strickler here in the Richmond area. IV therapy teams and hospitals used to start, maintain, and troubleshoot IVs. Those teams, for cost reasons, have been disbanded. So, who is the champion in the hospital that would present your product to materials management, purchasing, value analysis, risk management? And NICU or PICU directors.
Yeah, it's NICU directors, managers, a lot of times, or ICU managers. You got to get to the CNO person. We usually come in, we do free evals for a week, and let them, see how the product fits into their workflow. But it starts, there's somebody in every hospital that cares about this problem, and they have to stand up and say enough.
Let me ask you, Gary. The medical field is a tough one. And is there any one thing, I guess, would you wish you knew going into this field that you would tell others starting down this path?
Um, well, I'm going to go back to it takes a village. There's no I around this company, and you got to hire the best people. You got to hire the best people you can. So, and the ones that aren't great after you hire them, you got to move on. but you just gotta have good camaraderie and good team, people that are just passionate about solving the problem. You know, people that walk in here and say, hey, I'm just going to work here and make a lot of money, they don't last. People that walk in here and are passionate about getting rid of those pictures, you know, they're my best friends.
We have a question from Eddie, who says there's no reimbursement on this type of disposable in Benelux, so only extra costs for hospital and for the users. So are you working together with pump companies to make this available on all pump devices and monitors?
Well, I can't talk about that. You know that.
Can't talk about it, then don't talk. That's fine. Not
um, yeah, Benelux. Yeah.
so.
Um,
So let me ask you, Gary. Let me end with this one question. As the CEO, you know you've bought the company in 2010. What do you attribute ivWatch's success now that you're 13 years into this? What do you attribute it all to? Is it the product? Is it the people? Is it a combination or something else?
it's a combination. I mean, it's you know, it all starts with the people, you know, and having a culture of innovation, true innovation, being able to try, be able to make mistakes and fix them and move on fast, you know, and it's about the people. It's always about the people.
Good.
Companies are companies are nothing without the people.
Very true. Gary, thank you very much. Let me just finish up here just briefly. Let me let everyone know what's happening next. Just as a reminder, you can go to our website, RVA757Connects.com, and you can see where our four major focuses are, our initiatives, our virtual innovation spotlights, and so on and so forth. Also, as a reminder, this webinar has been recorded, and the recording will be available sometime later this afternoon on our website. You can go to our website under Innovation Spotlight, and you can click on the recording. You can also go back to see any of our recordings from any of our webinars back in 2023 and 2022. They're all available on our website as well. And you can learn more about the Global Internet Hub at globalinternethub.org if you'd like. You can get more information about what we're doing there. The next month, on Wednesday, February 7th, will be our next Virtual Innovation Spotlight webinar. We've got a topic. We haven't confirmed everything yet, so I can't announce it, but we're soon to have that. And so in the next couple of weeks, we'll be sending out invitations about that. Reminder, it's Wednesday, February 7th. It's always the first Wednesday of every month from noon to 1 o'clock. Again, I want to thank all of our corporate sponsors for all their help in supporting RVA757 Connects last year, the previous year, and in this current year in 2024. We appreciate your support and what you do for us. And again, thank you all for attending today's webinar. A reminder, our next one is on February the 7th at noon. Look forward to seeing you there. Have a great rest of your afternoon and a great 2024. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.